gonna dig this.
Hi everyone, let's get started. It's always exciting to start a new live stream. I was already chatting with a couple of people. Welcome everybody. Welcome to this is the third live stream on the language learning series. If you haven't been here before, you can always watch the recordings. They're always going to be on the channel. We have a lot of things to cover, so I'm going to keep this introduction short. First, I'd like to welcome, let me pull something up here. We have two new members. Ian Smirlis, thank you so much for joining the channel. This is just a reminder that if you're interested in joining the channel, just click the join button. Check out our perks and whatnot. We also have Thais Braz. I don't know if she's going to join us today, but she's our new member. Yay! This is really exciting for me because it means that the channel keeps growing and I get to do some new things. As usual, during the live stream, I may be focused on the presentation. Feel free to chat with each other while I'm there. Just make sure that you follow all the, guidelines, be civil to each other. I've never had any problems in live streams and having to get rid of somebody. Everybody's always just so polite and so respectful, so I really appreciate that. All right, so let's get into it. Sorry, okay, here, I had the wrong screen on. So this is our third episode in the language learning series. We'll be talking about setting language learning goals and following through with them. Setting goals is important, but equally important is to follow through with them. So we'll be looking at some issues that you may run into when you're either choosing a target language or if you're trying to, get more into your language learning. Maybe you want to rekindle an old language that you haven't learned in a while, or you've already started learning a new language and you want to, get even better at it. So what we're not doing today is I hate snake oil. I do not sell snake oil. So there are no quick fixes. Learning takes time. Everybody has a different pace. Some people may learn some things a little faster than others. And if somebody tries to sell you a quick fix, learn a language in 3 months, I would question, how honest they're being. And I'm not offering one-size-fits-all solutions. So whatever I say here, take it to heart. If you think that, if you think that it should work for you, great. I'm just giving you a lot of recommendations, a lot of things that I learned through my own experience learning languages and also as an English language teacher, an ESL teacher. Some things may work for you, some things you may think about, try it, and realize that maybe it doesn't work so well for you. Let's see, Ellison, welcome back, Ellison. Sylvia, hi, Sylvia. Nice to see some familiar faces back here. Let me see here. So Anas, 11:02 p.m. Anas used to stay up really, really late for the previous series that I had. So I switched the time a little bit so it would be a little better for people in her part of the world. Still kind of late, but it's Saturday, right? Thank you for being here, Anas. Hakima El Hansali, where are you from, Hakima? Welcome. I don't think I've seen you before. India, 1:34 a.m. Well, you're having a late night. Thank you very much for joining the live stream. Katie Denson from Albuquerque. It's not that late in Albuquerque. Welcome back, Katie. And Sylvia's from Italy. Kind of late in Italy too, but not so bad. All right, thank you all for being back. All right, so let's go back here. Let's get into it. So what we are doing is, well, we have a lot to cover. So take notes. I always tell my students to take notes. We'll talk about making some decisions, and what I mention here hopefully will help you deciding, how to go about in your learning your target language. But mostly, I'll give you some tools that you can use to evaluate your motivations. We talked about this in the last session. Also, your attitudes towards learning a second language and towards your target language. We started talking about it in the last session, but it didn't go too deep into attitudes. We'll go a little deeper into that. And then we'll talk about evaluating your personal situation. And that's why, before I said there's no one size fits all solution, because each person has a different set of circumstances. You're learning the language for different reasons and so forth. And very briefly, we'll start talking about some of the pitfalls, because you can make a lot of plans in your life, but if you're not prepared for pitfalls, for things just going wrong or your life circumstance changing, you can get disappointed. So you should just be prepared for some of the common pitfalls. Okay, so quick definitions. If you've been here, you know what they are. L1, L2 stands for your first language. That's the language you call your mother language. And L2 is whatever language you're learning. It could be a second, third, or fourth language, but we just call it the L2. I'll also be talking about your target language, whatever language you're interested in learning. Your target language could be English as a second language or as a foreign language. It could be French. Maybe you already speak English. You're trying to learn German, or you're thinking about learning a new language. That will be your target language. And also always keep in mind the learning context can be very different for each person. So you may be learning a language as a second language. So you're living in a country where they already speak that language, and you want to learn the language so you can communicate with people, or you're learning the language at home. So your target language is a foreign language. A foreign language, second language, whatever you want to call it. But the context may be different for different people. Hello, Agape from New York, Sullivan County. Thanks for joining us again. So just to recap, last session we talked about motivation. In psychology, motivation are processes. They can be biological, emotional, social, and cognitive processes. And they're all involved in this urge you have to behave in a certain way that will satisfy your wishes, desires, and goals. So that's a very quick recap on what motivation is. So we have different motivations for different reasons. And depending on the type of motivation you have, you may be more or less successful at achieving your goal. We talked about Gardner and Lambert's model of motivation specifically for second language learning. You can have an integrative or instrumental motivation. So integrative means you want to learn the language to socialize with people. You're interested in the culture. You want to embrace that language emotionally, psychologically, and so forth. Not just learn the grammar and be done with it. Now, if you are just learning because you have a job and you need to be able to learn to read manuals in that language, for example, that would be an instrumental motivation. You just need the language for a very specific reason. It's a tool, okay? So these are quite different motivations. And of course, depending on the motivation you have, you will put more or less effort in one area or the other. If your motive is only instrumental, you're probably just going to learn the vocabulary that you need for that specific function that you want the language for, maybe grammar, some vocabulary, and you're done. If you have a more integrative motivation, you will want to learn a lot more. We also talked about Bandura's social cognitive view of motivation, where you have intrinsic motivations. They come from within the individual, and extrinsic motivation, which come from outside. And intrinsic and extrinsic motivations will change your motives for doing something. So are you doing Are you learning a language just to get a grade, pass a course, and that's all you want? What's your reward for learning the language? If you have an intrinsic motivation, sometimes the reward is what you feel for being successful. So the reward is more internal. There's no good or bad motivation, but sometimes depending on the motivation you have, things can kind of backfire on you. If you always expect a certain reward coming from the outside, you take away the reward, you're not motivated anymore, and that's when many people stop learning the language or their target language. So that's what I was saying here. So just be careful be aware of your motivations. Be aware of what rewards you expect in your language learning activities. Are they positive rewards? Are they rewards that are sustainable? Are they rewards that always require outside feedback for you? Which is okay, but if you take away the feedback, are you still going to be able to reward yourself so that you continue learning on your own? Okay, so just be aware of what your motivations are, okay, and how your motivations are affecting how you actually engage in language learning. Okay, so there's something wrong here. What are your good and not so good motivations for learning your target language? So really quickly, we already talked about it last week. So really quickly, what are some of your motivations? Especially, we have a lot of people that came back. Why is it doing that? We have many people that came back from last week. So based on what you learned, hopefully you learned something last week. Maybe you have different answers here for your motivations. What have you found about your motivations? What are some of your good motivations and maybe some that are not so good? Anything that you learned that is perhaps different? Let me switch to this. Hey. Sylvia, it's 11 o'clock in Italy. Good. So Sylvia doesn't have to go to bed too late. British Virgin Islands. Hello, Bernardo. Welcome. Roxana Chavez, greetings. I'm your professor. That is an honor. Roxana is one of our channel members. She was one of the first channel members. There's a little bit of a lag, I was told, between the time that I ask a question and the time that I start getting replies. So let's hope that it's not too bad this time. So anything new, anything you learned about your motivations, things that maybe you learned that are not a very good motivation, maybe something that's unrealistic? Let me see if I can get from... All right, we're going to have a quiet crowd today, or maybe it's just the lag. I really apologize if the lag is getting in the way. There's not much I can do about it. YouTube is supposed to let me set the lag time so it's not, too big, but sometimes I think it has to do with the connection, or the internet gods are at play here. All right, so I don't think we're getting this quickly enough, so that's okay. You can always answer. If maybe you are answering now and I'm not getting your replies, I will keep an eye on the chat. If you have anything that you want to say about your good and not so good motivations, just go ahead and say it and I'll read it later. All right, so moving on. All right. So let's talk about a little bit more about attitudes, your attitudes in language learning. So these are different. You can have a certain motivation. For example, I really want to learn this language. I'm motivated. It's going to help me get a better job, or I need this language to study in my field, or whatever reason you have. So that reason gives you a drive. It gives you a particular motivation for you to engage in language learning. However, you can be motivated in a particular way, but you also have your attitudes. Okay, so you can have positive or negative attitudes. And there are certain things that will determine or at least affect the attitudes that you have towards, learning a language. Let me give you an example that actually it's a little personal. So when I was all the way up to high school, being smart was not a good thing. Okay, so if you were in a class learning, for me, it was related to learning biology. So I was taking high school biology, and I happened to be really, really good at it. Okay, I had a gift to understand all those concepts. Everybody else had a really hard time, but I was really good at it. So I was so excited every time I had biology. I was motivated because I was doing well. So I had this internal motivation, right? This intrinsic motivation to go to class and study and learn. But in class, the teacher would ask questions, and sometimes I would answer the question or even ask questions. And my my classmates would go, ooh, he's a nerd. Or he's a biology geek or something. Okay, so they would shame me for doing well. Okay, so that is one of the things that could determine your attitude. The kind of pressure, outside pressure from your peers that you have to engage in learning. Okay, it could be language learning, it could be learning anything, or to perform. So you would think that having good performance would be applauded. People would say, "Wow, you're really good at it." But society, that's not how society works, right? Sometimes you have people making you feel bad for doing well. Okay, so if you have a positive attitude towards learning itself, you're probably going to engage in it and that will affect your drive. It will affect your motivation to continue doing it. Okay, but if the attitude is negative, like for my classmates, doing really well in that class was like, oh, you're a nerd. So they had a negative attitude towards learning. Essentially, they had a negative attitude towards intellectual curiosity. If you're too interested in the class, you're a geek. So, okay. And actually, for me, it was kind of a turning point in my education, because I realized how stupid that was. I did that myself. It's like in other classes, when there was a student that really stood out, I was like, you're the teacher's pet. You're the teacher's pet. And then I realized it's like, wait a minute, it's like, why is that? So when it comes to language learning, we may have that kind of attitude that doing too well in the language makes you okay. Give you another example from personal experience. So I had a student who was having a really hard time. I was teaching him English as a second language. And sometimes, we would work on pronunciation, and he would refuse to pronounce the words correctly, or at least to improve his pronunciation. Sometimes you couldn't understand him because he had such a thick accent, and it felt like he was not even trying. He was not trying to change his pronunciation, right? So after trying, and there were many other problems with grammar and everything, right? And his engagement, he didn't really want to engage in the course. So I talked to him once and said, "Oh, how's it going?" And I started asking him questions. And long story short, I figured out that he hated American culture. He absolutely hated American culture. He was living in the United States, but he hated the fact that uh, he had to leave his country and live here. He hated it. He missed his country, and he felt that if he learned English too well, especially if he learned American English too well, it was as if he was like betraying his culture. Okay, so we talked a lot about it and said, well, I understand how you can feel about it, but you're living here now, man. It's like, it's just we worked on it. We talked a lot about it over. I had him for 2 semesters, and after a while, he started realizing that it's like, I'm me. I have my culture. I'm not losing my culture. And learning English, especially when you're living in the United States, learning American English, didn't make him a terrible person who was betraying his country or his culture. He could still maintain his culture, continue speaking his language at home, but he could still embrace the language as a tool that he needed to survive in this country. So it was cool. He was still a little suspicious, but it was cool. So there are many things that go into creating an attitude. It's a really complicated topic in psychology. Your the motives you have can influence the attitude you have towards it. We last session we talked about having realistic goals. If your goals are really unrealistic and you start failing because your goals are, or you have a perception of failure and you keep having that perception of failure, you start creating a negative attitude towards learning. You say, this is horrible. It's not pleasurable. Okay, so you see learning as a bad thing. You see learning as a painful experience. Okay, no one is really creating the pain. You're creating it for yourself many times. So you need to kind of take a look at your attitudes and try to figure out where they're coming from. So they could come from cultural aspects, like the example I gave you about that student that he hated American culture, and it completely created a negative attitude, not just about the culture, but towards learning the language. How can you learn a language that's spoken by people that have a culture that you despise, right? It can be pretty complicated, and it's something that it can take you, a lot of soul searching, a lot of thinking to figure out. And also keep in mind that you can have different attitudes toward different target languages. So you may be learning 2 languages. Let's say you're learning French and German. You can have positive attitudes towards learning French and negative attitudes towards learning German. It could be the culture. You feel closer to French culture than German culture. It could be your learning experience. Maybe you have great French teachers and your German teachers are too strict or something. It creates a negative attitude towards that language. So you could have attitudes towards learning in general, but also each specific language could create different attitudes. It's kind of cool, kind of interesting. The Ellison, I think from before, Ellison said, I like reading, and when I read, I get better, so I can read more. Yeah, so the more you do it, the more you are successful, the more it motivates you. That's a positive. internal, no, intrinsic motive. Keep doing it. If it's working for you, if you feel that you continue being successful, definitely you should continue doing it. Just capitalize on that motivation that you have. How to understand attitude of the speaker in academic listening. Well, understanding a speaker's attitude. Oh, I see. So, how to understand the attitude of a speaker? You're talking about the person who's talking to you, right? Not your own attitude. Well, that's really complicated. We're not really necessarily talking about other people's attitudes when they're talking to you, but you can tell that from a lot of experience. Like if someone is being sarcastic towards you, if they're using harsh words, there's the tone of voice. There are a lot of things that will tell you what attitude that person may have towards you or towards the conversation you're having, and so forth. It has to do with the person's biases and so forth. That's a good question. We could talk about that for another hour. All right, so attitudes towards yourself as a learner. That's also very important. I kind of talked about that when I said that, when I was in high school learning biology, I had a certain attitude towards myself as a good biology student. But then when I went to my math class, I was like, I hate this, because I had a self perception. Okay, there are many aspects of the attitude towards yourself, but I think perceived competence is really important in language learning. What is your perceived competence? How do you see yourself as a learner? Okay, when you think of yourself as a person learning your target language, do you see yourself as in a positive light? Or do you see yourself as, oh gosh, you're just doing it because you have to, but you don't have a very positive perception of your competence as a learner? Meaning you're able to organize yourself, go to class, or read a book, find your own materials. How do you see yourself as that? And also as a speaker of your target language, okay? Especially if you're learning the language because you want to communicate with speakers of the language. A lot of times I see students that are doing okay. They know the grammar. They have good vocabulary. They're good students. But when it comes to speaking, they have a negative view of their performance. They think they don't sound good enough. Oh, I want to sound like a native speaker, but I have an accent, and I have to say, so what? Everybody has an accent. So sometimes I find myself, like when I teach listening and speaking, I find myself working on the students' perception or self-perception before I can even start going into the listening and speaking parts of the course themselves. Okay, so do you see yourself as a loser? Do you see yourself as a winner? Something in between. That's really important. I've had students before that they thought so highly of themselves, their attitude, their perception of their competence was so high that it was just like too much. I had to say, okay, stop and listen to me. There was one student in particular I'm thinking about. She would just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and sometimes I couldn't even understand her very well. She was kind of like an intermediate student, but she thought her English was just so wonderful, and it was good, but she was taking a course to improve it, and she didn't really learn anything new because she thought she already knew everything, right? So even that, if your perception is off because you think you're too much of a winner or too much of a loser, things can go awry. So you have to find, what is your true measure of your competence. And if you think that you're being too negative on yourself, you need to change that, or at least think it through. Okay, recognizing your talents is as important as recognizing your weaknesses. That student didn't have a problem recognizing her talents, but she had problems recognizing her weaknesses. But what I see most frequently is, students that feel they're so hard on themselves. They're so their expectations of their performance are so high that they're stuck. They can't really make progress. They can't even learn very well because they're just so tense. They see them. They don't recognize their talents. They don't recognize that they're already at a certain level in the language. They just need to keep building on top of that. They always think that they're no good, no good, no good. I'm terrible. So just be careful with that. Your negative attitudes can hold you back. Okay, these are some of the things that I've heard time and time again as an ESL teacher. Oh, I can't do this. Whatever the skill is, listening, speaking, whatever. Oh, I might as well just give up on that. Okay. Oh, I've been working on my pronunciation for years, and I'm not going to do this anymore. Okay. So if your attitude is too negative, you end up believing that there's nothing else that you can do about it. Okay. And sometimes it's just your perception. It's not really that bad. Or I don't want to use the second language so people don't realize I'm terrible at it. Okay. Why are you so quiet? You never participate. You don't talk. Are you shy? Well, no, it's just that, my pronunciation, my grammar, my vocabulary, this. So there are all these negative self perceptions that you have, that it's like you see yourself as a bad speaker of the language, so I won't talk to anybody. The problem is that for you to improve, you need to speak, you need to write, you need to read, you need to continue using the language, right? If you say, well, I'm not going to use the language until I sound really good, well, you'll never get to sound really good because you're not using it. So you create this vicious circle. And, some people even say, well, who needs this language anyhow? Who cares? I don't need to learn this language. It's just too hard. I'm not getting anything back. Well, remember, motivation. You need to have some kind of reward. You have to have some internal reward, some intrinsic rewards, or extrinsic, or whatever. It has to get you someplace. If you have a really negative attitude of yourself as a learner, okay, you will not be able to keep your motivation going for you to continue learning more and more. So you just say, well, I don't care. I don't need this anymore. And unfortunately, I've seen people just give up when they could have done okay. They could have done great if they didn't see themselves so negatively. All right, so this session is actually about setting goals, right? So you understand your motivation, you understand your attitude. Okay, I'm ready. You can keep working on your motivation and attitudes and so forth. Doing that will help you make decisions and follow through with your decisions. Okay, how are we doing on time? Let me skip this. We can go back to this. So when you understand your motives, you understand your attitudes towards learning your target language, now it's time for you to set some realistic goals. And remember, maybe you're thinking about starting a new language, or you've already started, but you want to, reboot it. You want to perhaps have a different attitude so that you can get motivated and continue learning a language. You still need to set some goals. Okay, from now on. Okay, what are your goals? What do you want to do? What do you expect to get out of this? So there are certain things that you should avoid, okay, for you to have realistic goals. One is avoid New Year's resolution types of goals. These are famous, I think, worldwide, right? January 1st, people make all these resolutions. I'm going to change the world. I'm gonna lose 100 pounds. I'm gonna win the marathon. Well, these are not very realistic, okay? Because you haven't really put in the work before making that decision. You haven't really put in the work to think, okay, can I do it? How can I do it? And so forth, okay? Avoid goals based on fleeting emotional states. New Year's resolutions. You're excited about the new year, new beginning, new me, woohoo! So you're in that excited state, emotional state, and you end up making these resolutions that the next day you may not be as excited anymore. Okay, so you have to be realistic about where you are, what you want to do, and so forth. Okay, and avoid goals that you have not thought through. Okay, basically, summarizes the previous 2 points. Now, think through the goal that you're setting. Okay, how do you do that? We'll see that. So, when you set goals, and these are my recommendations. Okay, first, evaluate your resources and try to harness the resources that you have. Okay, if January 1st you say, "Oh, I'm going to change the world." Okay, how? What are the resources that you have at hand that you can use to change the world? Okay, what are the resources that you need to change the world? If you don't have those resources at hand, can you harness those resources? Can you go after them, put them together, and change the world? Okay, when you think it through, you may come up with a more realistic decision that perhaps changing the whole world is not feasible, but maybe I can change my community. Who knows? Okay, so evaluate and harness your resources. When it comes to a second language learning, there's an investment of time and money. Do you have the time? Do you have the money? Money is not always, the worst of the issues here. There's a lot that you can do without spending a lot of money. If you have access to the internet, which costs money, but if you have access to the internet, you have access to a lot of materials in other languages that you can use to learn. Maybe you can't afford taking a course or having a private tutor. Well, then you need to pare down your goal, and your goal will you need to change your goal to meet the resources that you have. Time can be an issue too. Okay, I want to take this course, I want to learn this language, but then you might even get started and realize I don't have the time. Well, time is out there more than money, right? Everybody has time. You just need to maybe move things around. You need to think it through to see how can you make the time, okay, and how much time is realistic for you to think that you can devote to this new activity or this renewed activity. Do you have access to courses and materials? Okay, so do you need to go to college, to a community college and take a course? Or maybe where you live, you have private courses. Sometimes you have religious institutions that offer language courses. So evaluate your access to courses, your access to materials. Okay, some languages are difficult for you to get materials for. English, it's everywhere, right? So that shouldn't be a problem. Maybe finding courses that are affordable and that wouldn't take all of your time may be an issue. So you need to think about these things. Okay, if you have a language where you have very, very limited resources, you have very limited materials that you can get your hands on. You can't really find courses in that language. There are no instructors in that language. Well, you need to make your goal, adjust your goal so your expectations are not too high and you won't give up because, you think it didn't work. Do you have the emotional support to do it? Okay, I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago that sometimes you need your family and friends to be behind you, depending on your situation. Okay? You need the emotional support of family and friends. So if you do find a course, you do find the time, and then you leave your family to go to school, and they're like, "What? You can't go? What about us?" So you may need to talk to your family before you make a commitment. Identify barriers and possible solutions. For example, your family. Is your family going to be a barrier? Well, then you need to find some solution talk to them, negotiate, I'm going to spend this much time learning, but then on the weekends we're going to have family time or something like this. Some barriers and solutions could be short term, some could be long term. Okay, so maybe I don't have time, this much time right now, but in a year I'm going to have more time. Okay, so short term, this is the barrier. How can I find a solution for that until I have more time? Just think it through. Think it through, and be prepared for life changes, and be prepared to respond accordingly. A lot of times you plan things. You say, "Oh, I'm going to do this and this and this," and then something happens that changes everything. And a lot of times I see people just give up. Oh, I started taking this course, and everything was fine, but then I had this change. I'm going to drop the course. I've had students come to me and say that. And a lot of times, most of the times, they come to me, they say, I had a life change. I'm going to drop the course. I say, wait. Before you drop, give yourself a week or two. Try this, try that. We talk a little bit. And a lot of times they just realize it's like, yeah, I just needed time to rethink my life and to accommodate the changes into my life and make time for things that were important. Of course, if learning the target language is not as important as other things, sometimes you just need to take care of your life, and you can always go back to your language learning. But don't give up too quickly. Okay, a lot of times it's just about being prepared to accept that things change, and what can you do about it? Okay, I know it's easier said than done, but just think about it. Okay. And I think one of the most important things about goal setting, and I need to listen to myself here too, is that when you start, thinking about all the things that you need to accommodate, and time and money and schedules and so forth, you have to actually do it. Okay, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to do this and this and that," but then never actually take the steps. Okay, so change your schedule. If you have a schedule, sit down and make changes in your schedule. Move things around. Talk to your family and say, "Hey, family night, I need to change this to this other day." Sometimes you need to talk to your employer and say, "I'm thinking about taking a course, and can we, work something out regarding my schedule?" Okay, set up a study schedule. Okay, unless you want to learn your target language, in a very informal way. But even then, have a study schedule and set it up. Okay, so Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm going to stop and read for an hour in my target language. Now, create a schedule. At least give it a try. Because once you sit down and you actually set up a schedule and leave your schedule where you can actually see it, it kind of guilts you into doing it if you didn't do it. I don't know. If you just think about it, it's one thing. When you actually start taking the steps, you end up. I think you're more successful at changing your behavior. Old behaviors are hard to change, and when you want to start learning something new, you want to start learning a new language, you're going to have to change a lot of old behaviors to accommodate that new activity. Get information about the resources. Okay, so we talked about looking at your resources. Oh, I hear there's a course. I hear that. No, just actually sit down, get online, start searching things. If there's a course someplace, get in the car. If you can, depending on COVID in your country, get in the car and go ask questions. Once you start taking these small steps, you'll realize that it's not really that complicated. In your head, things may look a certain way, but when you actually start doing it, you start creating a schedule, you start getting information, actively getting information, you may realize that it's like, hey, this is easy, this is kind of cool, I can do this. Okay, And if not, well, at least now you know that you can't. Or you change your goal to a more realistic goal. But you have to get out there and start actually doing it. Let family and friends know, okay, if that's your situation. Ask for help. Ask for help, okay? And keep it simple, okay? Keep it simple. Don't try to do everything at the same time. Don't try to do too much at the same time. Keep it simple. Seriously, don't just think about it. Get out there and start doing it. All right, let's try this chat again. So, what have you learned so far in these sessions? Is there anything that you agree or disagree with? Thinking, oh, Mark, you don't know what you're talking about. There's something that you've already thought through in the last 3 weeks that you learned. See, Ellison said, I think cultural impositions actually occur when people can't understand the foreign language. In reality, generally in that case, they only know saying some foreign language brand names. That's right, or something like that. Yeah, unless you are a language learner and you're involved in it, there are a lot of misconceptions. There are a lot of myths, which we'll talk about next session. And some of these myths around second language learning, some of these misconceptions can actually be kind of destructive. They don't encourage people. They're not cool. And you need to be aware of these misconceptions and especially myths. That's why every session I start by saying, I'm not selling you snake oil. Okay, I'm not giving you one size fits all solutions. I'm trying to be real here. And maybe, people are going to watch these live streams and say, oh, he's not giving me the solution that I want, so I'm not going to watch this anymore. But I'm just being real. Maybe I'm making less money this way, but, I don't want to lie to people and say, I have all the answers. But yes, Ellison, there are a lot of ideas that people have about second language learning that are just bad. They're just wrong. And they go after people that are trying to do good for themselves. Sylvia says, anytime I'm able to use a new vocabulary or to understand an idiom I have never heard before, it is like an epiphany. And it makes me feel proud of myself. Of course, yeah. And that can boost your confidence. That can change your attitude towards learning. Like if you're trying to learn vocabulary, for example, just to use Sylvia's example, and you keep doing it in a certain way, and it's just not working, it's not pleasurable, it's not giving you any satisfaction, well, maybe you need to stop and think, what am I doing? How am I doing this? Is this the best way of doing it? Let me get some help. Talk to people that actually know what they're talking about, people that learn languages or people that teach languages, and see maybe there are better ways for me to learn vocabulary. And once you start learning vocabulary and you have realistic goals, you don't want to learn 1,000 words a week. You're just like, you have an epiphany about something and you feel good about it and you want to learn the next word. I had some really, really interesting comments to my last vocabulary video. I think I posted it yesterday. I had a few comments that were like really, really, really positive. People saying that, watching the video, they are actually learning the language. They can like feel, the words. And I even had comments from native speakers of English saying, man, I've been watching your videos and I have a different perception of these words that I already knew. And it makes me feel really good. It's like I'm doing something positive. I'm changing the world. No, I'm not changing the world, but I hope that I can help people. That's of course, that's for sure. Let's see, let me switch. See if I have better luck here. No. Yeah, I think the chat is kind of slow. Probably people are replying, and I am not getting your replies. So I'm really, really sorry about that. That's terrible. All right, you can always, if you have any questions or if you have comments, even if you think of something later on, you can always come back to this video and comment. Comment, not chat, but write a comment to the video, and I will answer that. I think people are silent, maybe. See, I don't know how long ago, Ellison, I don't know how long ago you wrote this. Somebody told me in the last session that they wrote something and they were watching it on their TV or something, and they wrote a comment, or they saw people commenting, and it was taking like a long time. If you're silent, that's okay. I'm not going to force anybody to. Just now. Okay, so thank you, Ellison. So I guess that may not be a big problem. All right, let's just wrap it up. So remember that the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. That's a famous saying. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. We can plan and plan and plan, and doesn't mean that things will turn out. Well, Perk, it's okay to be in the silent crowd. That's fine. If you don't feel comfortable, or if you have nothing to say, or whatever, it's fine. I'm just trying to make sure that if somebody does want to say something, that I'm getting it. But apparently, that hasn't been a problem this time. All right, so make plans, but be aware that things could change. Things can go wrong. Some of the pitfalls can actually be self-inflicted. And those are sometimes, I think, the worst. You end up creating situations for yourself. For example, you planned poorly. You didn't think through. The things you needed to do before you started engaging in your second language, or you planned but you took no action, or your actions were not, really the best, and you're not changing. You continue doing the same thing, expecting different results. So these are self-inflicted pitfalls. But there are also external pitfalls. And I've already mentioned these sellers of easy solutions. Actually, in preparing for the live stream, I've been watching a lot of language learning videos on YouTube. And I don't want to be super negative, because I think everybody, has the right to go to YouTube and, do their thing, create their own videos. But I was really surprised at how many videos and even videos by people that I thought were good. They have good, they teach English well, or they teach German well, or whatnot. But they were selling these dubious things. I was not sure what they were promising. Like if I tell you, come to Snap Language and I will help you become fluent in English in 3 months. Doesn't matter, how bad your English is, you're going to be speaking perfect English. You should look at me and say, hey, dude, what are you saying? How are you going to do that? So I understand that people want to sell their product. They want their channel to do well. They want people to click their videos and watch their videos. But that can have some negative consequences for people that believe that they can actually do what these people are promising. Last session, I showed that video, the thumbnail for a video promising, 1,000, was that 1,000 words a month or a week? Something, ridiculous that maybe you can do it. I don't think I could. 1,000 words, or even 100 words, 100 new words a week. That's a lot. Like the vocabulary videos that I make, which are both for native speakers and for non-native speakers. I think the non-native speakers watch my videos. They may learn, 4 or 5 words that week, maybe 6 words that week, and that's already a lot. So I don't overpromise, so that I can give you what you need. And be careful, and how do you recognize these pitfalls? How do you know that you're self-inflicting, or you're victim of external, pitfalls? How do you recognize and how do you avoid these pitfalls? Oh, sorry, you're gonna have to wait until next Saturday. That's the topic for the next one, the 4th event, the best way to learn a language, avoiding pitfalls and myths. I'm still working on this live stream next week. The best way to learn a language. I think by now, if you've been attending these live streams and if you know my take on language learning, I think you know what I'm going to say about the best way to learn a language. But we will talk about different methodologies of different language learning methodologies, which ones may be more or less promising, which ones you might want to try, which ones you might want to avoid. And we will also talk about avoiding those pitfalls that you create for yourself, and also these external pitfalls. Okay, and we'll talk about myths about second language learning. There's a lot of misinformation about second language learning, which is kind of sad because I think a lot of people are trying. Let me keep this. Oops. No. Sorry. Okay, I am lost. Where is it? I think many people are doing their very best trying to learn a language, and then you have people that are, promising these crazy things, or that are saying things that are untrue about language learning, and it may have an impact on whether or not you learn a language, whether or not you even choose to learn a language. All right. Okay, I don't see any questions. The crowd is a little silent today. So I am going to close it. So just final announcements. Remember, I have a website. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. I promise I will be a little more active on Instagram. You can register for updates. I don't send people a lot of emails, but there's a form that you can go to my website and just join the website, and if there is anything, you will receive it. Don't forget that you can join the channel now. It would be really, really helpful to me. The channel is growing, but making it on YouTube is not really easy. You can get thousands of views every day, but it doesn't mean that you're making thousands of dollars. I wish I could. So any bit would help. If you want to join the channel, either as a supporter, your contribution would be very much appreciated. If you want to get some extra materials and so forth, there's a higher tier. Actually, right after we finish here, I am going to post a members only video about grammar video that I posted early this week. There's tons and tons of sellers of effortless English. Yeah, there are many of those. If you want to learn something, you have to put some effort into it, at least some effort into it. And any promise of effortless learning, well, come to the next session. All right, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.